I think it's generally conceded by everybody, including the Russians. It's just that Westerners are a lot better at propaganda or narrative control, or the information war. It's something that has been kind of developed. It's a fine art. It's really what we're all about. It's almost like it used to be a weapon that we learned how to wield maybe during the Cold War, but it's almost like the weapon is we consumed us, and that's all we are at this point. It's just what people live in narratives, right? And it seems like that narrative is more important than reality. A lot of the Russians complain about how terrible the Russians are at explaining themselves. I mean, you noticed too, like at the beginning of the war, it seemed like other people had to come forward and kind of like explain what the Russians were doing. At first they didn't really understand, and then the Russians themselves, Scott Ritter has made some trips to Russia, and he said, well, one thing is that this government's not very good at is explaining what they're doing. They just don't seem to pay attention to that. I guess their idea is that, well, we do the right thing and we figure out the correct policy and we stick to it. There's an explanation, like Putin gives his explanations. Actually, he gives very long and well-reasoned explanations, but it's all very intellectual. It's not like, okay, let's together we figure out this is going to be the meme of the day, or this is the message. Make sure everybody repeats it, and we'll just drive it home. No, it's just every once in a while Putin gives a speech or Lavrov gives a speech and they lay it out. And it's all, it's actually, they really do explain what they're doing. But there's no effort to weaponize it, right? And
they don't market it. They don't push it out. They're not paying for Google ads and boosts on
what
Facebook.
Happens is like other people have to listen to it and figure it out and explain it to the rest of the world or to the Russian people or, whatever.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
and I think an example is like there's a huge difference between the reports that come out of the Russian Defense Ministry, their reports, and the reports that come out from the Ukrainian side. I mean, the Ukrainians are always making wild claims that are, are later revealed to be false by the facts, But, and I guess you can see what they're doing now with this atrocity story. The Russians. The Russian Defense Ministry generally releases these very boring reports, but they're factual and they're actually very conservative. Like I was saying, we've said a few times, I think, is they don't declare that a town has been captured by the Russian armed forces until it's been truly and well captured. I mean, they not only have they captured the territory of the town, but they've also captured some of the surrounding areas to make, to the point where they feel completely secure that there's no way that the Ukrainians could recapture it. So you may get a report from an unofficial source, the Russians have taken this town, and it'll be 2-3 weeks later before the Russian Defense Ministry will come out and say it. But and I think, as I mentioned in a previous podcast, there was an instance not too long ago where it was actually a British think tank, very much pro-Ukrainian or whatever, said, oh yeah, the Russians got this town. But the Russian Defense Ministry still didn't say it. They waited another 2 weeks before they declared it. I mean, they're very conservative. They're very boring. They're very factual. But all in all, they're really quite reliable. It's not that they're incapable of spinning things, and sometimes they suppress information, but it's very, very rare that they tell outright falsehoods. It's not information warfare. It's not very sexy at all, but maybe in the long run, people start to appreciate it.
Yeah, it's like I'm in an upside down world because I'm always being accused of being a Russian bot and working for Russia, and that the election was stolen by Russia, that whole the Russiagate stuff, and that there's all these Russian troll farms that are controlling our narratives, here in the United States. When the reality is it's completely the other way around. What I see on Twitter and on TikTok on social media, because I'm posting our content there, is that you have these what seem to be very clear kind of Ukrainian bots and troll farms that they're very uniform. They use the same type of memes, the same type of avatars, the Doge in dog, dressed in Ukrainian military outfit. It's
Yeah,
not
I've seen it.
even right. They they're not even smart about it. It's so clear what they're doing. It's like this is their badge for as a Ukrainian troll farm, and we're in this upside down world where we're always saying that Russia's propagandizing everybody, and I'm not seeing anything come out from really Russia. Like you're saying, they're very conservative. They don't really try to control narratives or push stories or do any spin. I mean, in that interview with Tucker Carlson, Putin said, "Yeah, well, we don't, you know, the West is the king at propaganda. We don't even try to fight that war. It's not something that we're concerned about. Instead, they just do their own thing." And in a way, I think it's actually a very smart strategy because you don't get distracted with trying to control every little story and spin. Instead, you're just like, yeah, we forget all that noise. We're just looking at the battlefield. This is the war. This is what we're
Right.
doing. Minimize casualties, capture them. Let them say whatever they
Right.
want and say that we're monsters and all these things, and we just keep moving forward. And it just makes the West look just so stupid in the long run because it's slowly people start to say, "Hey, you lied to us about this. You lied to us about that. Why are we doing that?" And it's becoming clear to me that I would say that America and Western Europe is the most propagandized countries in the world. Yeah, at this point, I don't think that's a hyperbole. And it goes back to something you said in our previous podcast. You said that a lot of Soviet defectors, when they came to the United States, back when the Soviet Union was still around, they were struck by how naive Americans were in believing their media and their institutions, and I think because of that, we allowed us to be very susceptible to become the most propagandized people. We always trust CNN, BBC. When I was growing up young, I really put a lot of stock in The Economist and BBC. I would read these, check on them daily, and it's like these are the institutions that feed you the truth, and then it's just become like I can't trust them anymore, and it's ironic that I find RT to be so much more unbiased. And sometimes I think, am I going crazy? Am I becoming my own bubble and searching for this? Am I becoming a Russia puppet? But I'm not. I don't want to support really one side or that. I want the truth, and I want peace, and I want to avoid war. And it just becomes so clear to me that the West is propagandizing, its whole population to try to push us into a potentially catastrophic war, and it's just evil. And I don't understand how this happened so quickly. Like when do you think these institutions became corrupted and just became propaganda arms?
Yeah, well, I guess there was, well, like those Soviet dissidents, the defectors who came to the West because they were oppressed by the Soviet government, right? They were persecuted by the Soviet government. But just like they said, you need to be, you can't be too naive, right? You have to be somewhat skeptical. You have to you have to learn how to do your own research, so on and so forth, right? All in all, the trust that people placed in media authorities back in let's say the days of the Cold War was pretty well placed. There was reasons to look upon them favorably, but we developed bad habits over that time. Like we're saying, we just became too trusting, and I think all institutions over time can be hijacked, by various forces, and they can take advantage of that trust that's been built up, right, over the course of decades. This happens to corporations too. There can be a financial firm or something that has been well known, to be solid and trustworthy, and people trusted them with their well-earned savings for decades. My granddaddy did it, my daddy did it. I'm going to put my money there too, or whatever. And then you find one day that, well, okay, the firm's gone belly up. You lost your money. It's because somebody actually saw that there was an opportunity to take advantage of this trust that had been built up, right? And it happens with churches too. We can go on and on and on. But this is something that happened with I think, with our media and the corruption. There's always a bit of corruption, and it grew. But I think where it really metastasized was, after the fall of the Soviet Union, and then the unipolar moment, and it was this chance the whole world was at our feet. This is something that was true for our political elites, but it was also true for our media elites. As you say, power corrupts, absolute power.
So you think it was right then during the 90s that kind of when the media started to slip into becoming more and more propaganda? You think that's really when it was? I mean, for me, I would put the point at Donald Trump, like when Trump came up in 2015, 2016.
Points. There's more than one, it's... but yeah, I mean, for example, we saw in the run up to the Iraq War, just about all the major, the establishment media was online, and it really supported the lies that the government was telling us. At that time it was George W. Bush. Maybe you could say those were exceptional times, but that turned out not to be exceptional. That was. And then now we have, with especially since the rise of Trump, we have just a hyperpolarized situation where, hyperpolarized on a lot of issues, but when it comes to, national security, foreign policy, the narrative is still unitary. It's, I don't know. I don't really have an explanation. It's what's happened. It's where we are. I mean, it is. I do shake my head at it. Like, how could this be? But it is true. It's where we are.
Yeah. Would you agree with the statement that America and the West are the most propagandized countries in the world? Maybe with the exception of North Korea. I don't want to put out that disclaimer.
Yeah, I don't really even know what's going on in North Korea now. But
by the way,
well, I would say that just in general, because I would say that we've committed ourselves to certain ideas and certain causes that are actually patently false. There's Project Ukraine. There's the two big ones that we talk about are Project Ukraine and then Israel Palestine. And we've chosen, I would just say, the wrong side on these. And we have actually gone against what we say are our own values. And it's in this kind of situation, if you just let people thresh it out and talk about it openly, I think our side would win. But the establishment has taken the other side, and has taken, I'll just say, what is patently false positions, and positions that are contrary to what we say our values are, right? And so they're forced to rely heavily on propaganda. They're forced to constantly demonize their opponents and dig up atrocity stories or whatever, because a reasoned debate is something that they would lose.
Yeah, no, that's true. It makes sense. It's just frustrating, that how do you break through? I mean, I guess that's why we're doing this podcast. That slowly, more and more people are waking up and have a hunger for the truth, because hopefully people understand that the narratives that we're being fed are false. But it's also so frustrating how much faith people still have in the institutions, and how much they can still be in their own bubble, and they can just keep going. I think like a third of the population will never admit, people can't admit that they were wrong, especially when they take such an emotional position on something.
It's hard. No, it's hard.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I was going to ask you just a question when we were just talking about North Korea. I heard I heard something about like North Korea potentially sending 50,000 troops to Ukraine. Have you heard anything about that? I imagine Russia would just say no.
Yeah, right. I think that's a false story. From what I heard, I think the source for that story was in South Korea somewhere. I think it's just patently false. There's just the Russians don't need. Yeah, they don't need the troops. I don't. Yeah, it
would be a bad look for Russia. It's like they. Right, but
they're not hurting. Yeah, the fact is they're just not hurting for troops. They're getting 1,000 volunteers a day, and so they have more than enough. They have why should they do that?
Right. Yeah, it's just so frustrating talking about Ukraine and Russia with some people or seeing it online. It's just because, like, we're painted as somehow being against Ukraine and anti-Ukraine, and it can be more from the opposite. I really feel for these people, and I'm seeing these Ukrainian troll farms. I'm like, what are you doing to your own country?
Right.
You're killing, like, maybe they're just getting their little paycheck and they're willing to sacrifice their fellow citizens, their lives. I saw there's doctors in Ukraine are offering services to break legs and arms so that way they won't be conscripted, because like we've all seen these videos.
Right. They're very
of
common.
them.
I mean, they come out every day. I mean, it's just
Yeah.
there's a never-ending stream of them, of people being wrestled down on the streets,
Going
their
into
wives
or
or
just
mothers
going into
trying to,
people's homes, going into people's homes and pulling them out of their rooms and their beds,
or off of buses, or it happens all the time. This is the country that you're supporting. This is, of course, occasionally there may be some stories that mention in some aspect of this, but the full impact. No, if you're not if you don't venture out to the dissident media, right, you're just not going to understand what's happening there. Another thing that I saw that really drove home the horror that Ukraine has become is just, there's a video showing coils of barbed wire along the Tisa River, across from Moldova, I believe it is. And why is it there? Because they're trying to keep people from swimming across the river, their own people. This is the country that you're supporting. These people are, again, we had JFK go to Berlin and say, well, we don't have to build a wall to keep our people in. Well, they are, building walls or laying barbed wire to keep their people in. And this is the country that we're supporting. The people there are desperate to avoid prosecuting, fighting this proxy war that you want them to fight. You got to stop and think, what are you doing to these people?
Right.
And, so are we their enemy, or is it these people that the so-called, supporters of Ukraine, they're the ones that are destroying this country?
Right. Yeah, and you were talking about being a democracy. We'll let them have an election, but they won't, because they know Zelensky would be voted out. That the people don't want this war. We've said this before. If you're having to pull people off of buses, take them, out of their beds and their rooms, and then put barbed wire around your borders because people are swimming and drowning, trying to get away, or paying doctors to break their legs, or giving away their life savings to bribe somebody to get them out of the country, or so that
that's
they don't
another
get
thing
conscripted.
you see almost on a daily basis. There's stories about people that have been, often groups of people that are caught at the border. It's just that they're trying to get smuggled out. They had paid the smugglers, right? Hey, you hide me in the back of your truck, et cetera, et cetera. They got one scheme or the other. And I'm sure some of these succeed, but other schemes are foiled. And you see these people who have handed over their life savings being caught at the border. And then what's going to happen. They're going to be sent to the front lines.
Right. So saying you support Ukraine means you're supporting that right now. That's what you're supporting. It's just, it's evil. It's basically the Gestapo running around, rounding up people because they're running out and sending the front line, right? The average age now is like, what, something 47 or something like this?
Yeah, 46, 47.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a real tragedy.